My brother and ex-fiancée ruined my life and drove me out of town 12 years ago. Yesterday they showed up at my door homeless with their kids, throwaway for obvious reasons, though I doubt anyone in my family uses Reddit. This is going to be a long one, so buckle up. I've been sitting here for hours trying to figure out how to even start typing this. My hands are literally shaking right now, and I still can't believe what happened yesterday. I guess I should give some background first. I, 38M, grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania with my older brother Jake, 41M. Our parents weren't wealthy, but they worked hard to give us a decent life. Dad was a construction foreman, and Mom worked as a receptionist at the local clinic. From the outside, we probably looked like your typical middle-class American family, but there was always this undercurrent. Jake was always my parents' favorite. It wasn't even subtle. He was the firstborn, the star athlete, the handsome one according to all the relatives. 3 inches taller than me, naturally muscular while I was always kind of lanky. He was louder, more confident, more traditionally masculine in ways that made my quiet, bookish nature seem like a deficiency. My parents never said it outright, but their actions spoke volumes. Jake got a car for his 16th birthday. When my 16th came around, I got driving lessons and was told I could use Mom's old Toyota sometimes. That pattern repeated throughout our childhood. Jake's football trophies were displayed prominently in the living room while my academic awards were stuck on the fridge until they fell off and disappeared. When Jake made varsity, my parents rearranged their work schedules to attend every game. When I made it to the state science fair, my dad said, "That's nice, buddy," and asked if I could get a ride with someone else because they had already committed to something else. That something else turned out to be watching a game at a friend's house. Despite all this, Jake and I were actually close as kids. He was protective of me, especially in elementary school when I got bullied for being the smart kid. We shared a room until I was 12, and I genuinely looked up to him. Things started changing in high school. Jake's popularity soared while I found my smaller circle of friends who shared my interests in computers and technology. The gap between us widened, but we still had our moments. He'd occasionally invite me to parties, and I'd help him with homework or tech issues. College is where things really diverged. Jake went to a state school on a partial athletic scholarship while I got a full ride to Penn for computer science. I thrived in college. For the first time, being smart was an asset, not something that made me less than. I graduated near the top of my class, started a small web development business, and moved back to our hometown to be close to family while I built my company. That's where I met Melissa, now 38F. She was working at the bank where I set up my business accounts, and there was an immediate connection. She was smart, ambitious, kind, and the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. I was shocked when she agreed to go out with me. Our relationship moved quickly, we dated for a year, moved in together, and I proposed on our first anniversary. Here's where things start going south. Jake had been bouncing between jobs since college. The small-town football hero status only carried him so far, and a knee injury in college had ended his athletic aspirations. He'd come back home around the same time I did, and our parents let him live with them rent-free while he figured things out. Meanwhile, I was working 70-hour weeks growing my business, which was finally starting to take off. Melissa and I set our wedding date for June 15th, about a year after our engagement. Jake was, of course, going to be my best man. Around this time, I also started developing a new business idea. I'd noticed a gap in the market for local businesses needing affordable, custom e-commerce solutions. Most big firms were charging enterprise rates that small businesses couldn't afford, while template sites weren't customizable enough for specific needs. I spent months developing a proprietary system that would streamline the process, making it both affordable and highly customizable. I was excited about this idea. Really excited. It could transform my small web dev shop into something much bigger, potentially even with national reach. I talked about it constantly, with my friends, with Melissa, and yes, with Jake and my parents. Jake suddenly took an interest in my work for the first time ever. He started asking detailed questions about the business model, the technology, even the pricing structure I was planning. I was thrilled. Finally, my brother was seeing me for me, respecting what I was building. At least that's what I thought. About 4 months before the wedding, Melissa started acting different. She'd be texting constantly but hiding her phone when I walked in. Working late more often. Being vague about her whereabouts. I didn't want to be that guy who gets jealous and controlling, but something felt off. Then she started picking fights over small things. The wedding venue I'd booked wasn't nice enough, my business was taking too much of my time, I wasn't ambitious enough despite working myself to exhaustion. One night, she came home from drinks with coworkers smelling like the cologne Jake always wore. I recognized it immediately. It was a distinctive brand our parents had been giving him every Christmas since high school. When I casually mentioned it, she got defensive and turned it back on me, accusing me of not trusting her. I apologized and tried to forget about it. 2 months before our wedding, Jake announced at a family dinner that he was starting a new business. An e-commerce service agency for small businesses. Using a streamlined system he'd developed to make custom online stores affordable for local shops. My parents were ecstatic, praising his entrepreneurial spirit and innovation. I sat there in shock as he outlined my business plan almost word for word. When I finally found my voice and pointed out that this was literally the exact business I'd been planning and discussing for months, my mother actually said, "Well, honey, Jake has always been the more business-minded one. He has the personality to really make this work." My father nodded in agreement. Jake just gave me this look, half apologetic, half challenging, and said, "Great minds think alike, little bro." I was furious but tried to keep it together. Later that night, I confronted Jake privately. He denied stealing my idea, claimed he'd been thinking along similar lines for a while, and said the market was big enough for both of us. "Competition is healthy," he said with that same smug smile he'd had since we were kids, and he'd take credit for something I did. The next few weeks were a blur of betrayal after betrayal. Jake secured a meeting with the local business association, a connection I'd been nurturing for months. Suddenly he had a slick website and business cards for Next Level Commerce, even that name was similar to what I'd been planning. And somehow, he had startup capital. When I asked our parents if they'd invested in his business, they avoided the question and said they were supporting both their sons equally, which was a lie they'd been telling my whole life. 3 weeks before the wedding, I came home early from a client meeting to find Melissa packing her things. There was no hiding it anymore. She and Jake had been seeing each other for months. She handed back my ring and told me she was moving in with him. That their connection was undeniable and she'd been fighting it but couldn't anymore. She actually had the audacity to say, "You're a great guy, but Jake is. Jake. You understand, right? He's going places." I didn't understand. I couldn't comprehend how the two people I trusted most in the world could do this to me. I asked her about our future together, the plans we'd made, the life we'd been building. She looked at me with pity, and said, "Let's be honest. Your business is nice, but what Jake's building is going to be huge. He has vision. He has drive. He knows how to make things happen." It got worse. Jake had already contacted all our wedding vendors, explained the situation, and transferred many of the reservations to a different date, for their wedding. He'd paid the change fees, so most vendors had agreed without even contacting me. My parents knew about the affair and had kept it from me because they didn't want to hurt me and thought I should focus on my little web business instead of drama. The next few months were the darkest of my life. I had to contact everyone we'd invited to the wedding and explain that it was cancelled. Some had already heard rumors about Jake and Melissa. Our small town was buzzing with gossip, most of it painting me as the loser brother who couldn't keep his fiancée interested while successful. Charming Jake swooped in to save her from a boring life. My business suffered too. Jake had taken my idea and, with his natural charisma and apparently significant financial backing, which I later discovered came from a loan from our parents' retirement fund, was winning over local clients. He even hired away 2 of my part-time developers by offering them full-time positions with benefits I couldn't yet afford to provide. The final straw came 6 months after Melissa left. Jake and Melissa got married in the exact venue we had chosen, with many of the same details we had planned together. My parents were overjoyed, posting dozens of photos on Facebook calling them the perfect couple and Jake the son they'd always been proud of. They didn't even seem to realize or care how those posts might affect me. That night, I made a decision. There was nothing left for me in that town. My reputation was in tatters, my business was struggling, and every corner held memories of betrayal. I liquidated what I could, paid off my lease, and told exactly 2 friends where I was going. I left without saying goodbye to my family. They didn't deserve one. I moved to Seattle and started over completely. New name, legally changed to my mother's maiden name, new business, new life. The first few years were tough, rebuilding from almost nothing in an expensive city with no connections. But I had my skills and my determination. I focused entirely on work, took any contract I could get, lived in a tiny studio apartment, and saved every penny possible. Gradually, things improved. I built a reputation for quality work. Gained steady clients. Eventually founded a new company focused on specialized software for the healthcare industry, a completely different direction from my original business idea. By year 5, I had a stable company with 10 employees. By year 10, We had offices in 3 cities and over 50 staff members. I dated occasionally but kept everyone at arm's length. The betrayal had left deep scars, and I struggled to trust anyone fully. I saw a therapist for years working through the abandonment issues and family trauma. Slowly, I built a life I was proud of. Made real friends. Even developed a few serious relationships, though none led to marriage. Throughout all this, I had zero contact with my family. I blocked them on all platforms, changed my number, and instructed those 2 friends from my hometown never to reveal my whereabouts. From bits and pieces I heard through those friends, I learned that Jake and Melissa's business had initially boomed, expanding to neighboring towns. They had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. My parents doted on their grandchildren and continued to sing Jake's praises to anyone who would listen. That brings us to yesterday. 12 years of silence, 12 years of rebuilding my life thousands of miles away from the people who devastated me. 12 years of healing, growing, and becoming someone I'm genuinely proud to be. I was working from home when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but sometimes neighbors drop by about community matters. I'm on our neighborhood council now. I opened the door and froze. There stood Jake, Melissa, and 2 children, approximately 10 and 8 years old. Jake had aged poorly, heavier, with deep lines in his face and graying hair. Melissa looked exhausted, her once perfectly styled hair now dull and hastily pulled back. The children looked confused and tired, with backpacks and small suitcases beside them. For a moment, nobody spoke. I genuinely thought I might be hallucinating. Then Jake said, "Hey, little brother. You've done well for yourself." His voice was the same, but the cocky confidence was gone, replaced with something that sounded like desperation tinged with shame. I found my voice somehow and asked the only question that made sense: "How did you find me?" Melissa explained that they'd hired a private investigator about 6 months ago. It had taken significant time and money, but eventually, they'd tracked me down through one of my company's subsidiaries and cross-referenced with property records. Before I could ask why, Jake jumped in with the story. The business had thrived for the first 5 or 6 years. They'd expanded to multiple locations, had a team of developers, and were making good money. Then came a series of missteps, overexpansion, hiring the wrong people, a failed attempt to develop a proprietary platform that ate up their capital. Jake made a desperate gamble on cryptocurrency in 2021, investing nearly everything they had left just before the big crash. As the business failed, so did their marriage. They'd been legally separated for nearly 2 years but had been trying to co-parent while dealing with mounting debts. 3 months ago, the bank foreclosed on their house. 2 weeks ago, their landlord evicted them from the apartment they'd moved to after losing the house. "Where are Mom and Dad?" I asked, already guessing the answer. Dad had passed away 4 years ago from a heart attack. Mom had to sell their house to cover medical bills and her own care as her health declined. She was now in a modest assisted living facility, her retirement funds depleted partly from the original loan to Jake and partly from medical expenses. "So why are you here?" I asked, though I already knew. I could see it in their desperate expressions, in the way they'd tracked me down after all these years, in the small suitcases at their children's feet. Jake swallowed hard before answering. "We have nowhere else to go. Everyone back home has already lent us money we couldn't repay. Nobody will hire me because of the business failures and some bad decisions I made trying to save things." Melissa lost her job when the company downsized. "We've been staying in motels, but as of yesterday, we literally have nowhere to sleep. The kids haven't had a stable home in months." He paused, then added, "I know we have no right to ask you for anything. What we did to you is unforgivable. But we're desperate, and your family, no matter what happened." I looked at the children, who were clearly uncomfortable and confused about why they were standing on a stranger's doorstep. The girl, who looked so much like a young Melissa it was unsettling, asked quietly, "Is this really Uncle David?" I hadn't heard my original name in years. I invited them in. Not because I had forgiven Jake or Melissa, I hadn't, but because those children had done nothing wrong, and I couldn't leave them standing on my doorstep. The next few hours were surreal. The children, Emma and Tyler, explored my house with cautious curiosity while I had the most difficult conversation of my life with the 2 people who had once destroyed me. The full story emerged gradually. After initial success, Jake had made increasingly risky business decisions, ignoring Melissa's concerns. He'd become controlling and paranoid as things deteriorated, convinced competitors, including some of my old clients who'd never been satisfied with his services, were sabotaging him. He'd started drinking, then gambling, trying to find quick fixes to their financial problems. Melissa had eventually given him an ultimatum: get help or she'd leave with the kids. He'd gone to rehab for 2 months, during which time the business collapsed completely. By the time he was out, they were already facing foreclosure proceedings. She'd gotten a job at a call center but was laid off during a company restructuring. "Why didn't you contact your friends?" I asked. "Surely some of them would help." The uncomfortable silence told me everything. They had already exhausted the goodwill of everyone they knew. I later learned they'd borrowed money from virtually everyone in their circle with increasingly unlikely promises of repayment, burned bridges with angry outbursts as their situation worsened, and finally reached the point where no one would even answer their calls. "And you came to me," I said flatly. "The brother whose life you destroyed. The man whose fiancée you stole. The business owner whose idea you hijacked. You thought I would help you?" Jake actually broke down crying, something I'd never seen him do, not even when he'd blown out his knee in college. "I have nowhere else to turn," he said between sobs. "My children are sleeping in our car. I've failed them completely. I'll understand if you throw us out. But I had to try. For them." Melissa, who had been mostly quiet, finally spoke directly to me. "What we did to you was inexcusable," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's nothing I can say to justify it. I got caught up in, I don't even know, the excitement? The fantasy that Jake sold? I threw away something real and valuable for something that turned out to be smoke and mirrors. I've regretted it every day for years." I didn't respond immediately. My mind was racing through 1,000 thoughts and emotions. 12 years ago, I'd fantasized about this, Jake and Melissa destitute, coming to me for help, giving me the opportunity to reject them as they had rejected me. But the reality felt hollow. There was no satisfaction in seeing them broken, especially with innocent children involved. I told them they could stay the night in my guest room and pull-out couch while I considered what to do. I ordered pizza for dinner because I couldn't face cooking or going out to eat with them. The children were polite but withdrawn, clearly used to instability and adult tension. After they went to bed, I sat alone in my home office, trying to process everything. The betrayal still hurt, even after all these years. But I also recognized that I'd built something valuable from the ashes of that devastation. Would I have pushed myself so hard if I hadn't been driven by the need to prove myself? Would I have taken the risks that led to my current success if I hadn't already lost everything once before? I spent hours researching options. Shelters in the area. Assistance programs. Job opportunities that might match their skills. I also looked into my mother's situation at the assisted living facility, which was apparently bare bones and understaffed. By morning, I had made my decision. When Jake and Melissa came downstairs, looking like they'd barely slept, I laid out my terms. 1. I would pay for a modest 2-bedroom apartment for 6 months, with a lease in my name. They would need to find jobs and save enough to take over the payments after that time. 2. I would cover the children's immediate needs, school supplies, clothes, etc., and set up college funds for each of them that only they could access at 18. 3. I would upgrade my mother's care to a better facility and ensure she had proper medical attention. 4. In exchange, they would both get jobs, any jobs, within 2 weeks, and provide me with documented proof of their income and expenses. 5. They would both attend financial counseling and, in Jake's case, continue addiction recovery support. 6. They would never again presume upon our relationship or ask for additional financial support. 7. They would sign a legal document acknowledging this arrangement and the terms. "Why would you do this?" Jake asked, looking genuinely bewildered. "After everything we did?" "I'm not doing it for you," I replied honestly. "I'm doing it for your children, who deserve stability. And I'm doing it for myself, to finally close this chapter of my life." Melissa started crying, not the manipulative tears I remembered from our last confrontation years ago, but silent streams that spoke of genuine remorse. "We don't deserve your help," she said. "No, you don't," I agreed. "But that's not how decency works. You measure a person not by how they treat those who deserve kindness, but by how they treat those who don't." They accepted my terms immediately, with a humility that would have been unrecognizable in the Jake and Melissa I once knew. By the end of the day, I had made arrangements for an apartment viewing, contacted a lawyer about drawing up the agreement, and researched better care options for my mother. That night, after they had gone to bed, Emma, the 10-year-old, came downstairs and found me working in the living room. She stood awkwardly in the doorway until I noticed her. "Are you really my dad's brother?" she asked. "Yes," I replied simply. "He said you're very smart and successful. That you built everything yourself without help." I was surprised by this characterization. "Did he tell you anything else about me?" She nodded. "He said he did something terrible to you a long time ago, and that's why we never met you before. And that you're a better man than he'll ever be." I didn't know how to respond to that. After a moment, she continued, "Thank you for helping us. Dad cries at night when he thinks we're asleep. Mom too." With that, she turned and went back upstairs, leaving me with thoughts I'm still processing. So that's where things stand now. They're asleep in my guest rooms while I type this all out, trying to make sense of it. 12 years ago, these people took everything from me. Today, I'm in a position to either help them or turn them away. I've chosen to help them, not out of forgiveness, which I'm not sure I'll ever truly feel, but out of a recognition that holding on to bitterness would only continue to let them have power over my life. And frankly, because those kids deserve better than to suffer for their parents' mistakes. I don't know if this is the right decision. Part of me still wants to tell them to leave and never contact me again. Another part feels an obligation to the children and even to my mother, who, despite her favoritism, is still the woman who raised me. I guess what I'm asking is, am I doing the right thing? Or am I being manipulated once again by people who have proven they can't be trusted? Has anyone else been in a remotely similar situation? I'm second-guessing myself constantly, wondering if I'm being too harsh or not harsh enough. Update, 6 months later. First, I want to thank everyone for the overwhelming response to my original post. Your perspectives and advice helped me navigate an incredibly difficult situation, and I'm grateful for the support. It's been exactly 6 months since Jake, Melissa, and their children showed up at my door. A lot has changed, so I wanted to provide an update on how things have played out. I stuck to my original plan. I leased them a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood with good schools. Jake found work as a delivery driver within the first week, and Melissa secured a customer service position at a local healthcare company by week 2. Neither job was glamorous or high-paying, but they both showed up reliably and, according to their supervisors, yes, I checked, worked hard. The children enrolled in local schools and seemed to be adjusting well. Emma, especially, has flourished with stability and is showing remarkable aptitude in mathematics and science. Tyler struggled more initially but has been working with a school counselor and is making progress. My mother's situation has improved significantly. I moved her to a much better assisted living facility, and her health has actually improved with proper care. I visited her for the first time in 12 years 3 months ago. It was complicated. She cried, apologized, tried to justify her favoritism, then apologized again. We're rebuilding a relationship slowly, on my terms. As for Jake and Melissa themselves, they've maintained strict adherence to our agreement. They attend financial counseling weekly, have not asked for additional support beyond what was initially offered, and have been transparent about their finances. Jake continues with his recovery program and has remained sober. The most surprising development came 2 months ago. Jake approached me with a business proposal, not asking for investment or partnership, but for mentorship. He had identified a genuine gap in services for small local businesses recovering from financial hardship, something he now had first-hand experience with, and wanted my guidance on developing a sustainable model to help them. After careful consideration, I agreed to provide limited mentorship while making it clear that our financial arrangements would not change. To my surprise, his idea has merit, and he's approaching it with a humility and thoughtfulness I never saw in him before. He's building it slowly, outside of his regular work hours, with no shortcuts or quick success fantasies. Melissa and I have had several difficult but necessary conversations about our past. She offered no excuses for her betrayal, only genuine remorse and an understanding that some wounds never fully heal. She's focused primarily on rebuilding herself as a person her children can respect and providing stability for them. Last month, they invited me to Emma's school science fair. Watching her confidently explain her project, which won first place, I felt something unexpected, a connection to these children who share my blood but whom I never knew existed until recently. They call me Uncle David now, and I find I don't mind hearing my old name from them. The 6-month lease is up next week. True to my word, I've helped them establish sufficient savings and credit to take over the lease themselves. They'll be fully independent going forward, though I've decided to maintain the children's college funds regardless. As for forgiveness, I'm not there yet, and may never fully be. But I no longer carry the burning resentment that once defined so much of my life. There's a certain peace in that realization. Jake said something to me last week that has stayed with me. "You had every right to destroy us when we came to you," he said. "Instead, you showed my children what integrity looks like. That's a gift I could never repay." I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with Jake and Melissa. We're not friends, and the past cannot be erased. But we are, in some complicated way, family again. And for now, that's enough.